we would like to invite as kami mengundang dengan hormat perwakilan Cotton Council International untuk Indonesia. Boleh kita berikan sambutan yang hangat Bapak Rio Hartanto Jap.
Selamat siang. Terima kasih. Nama saya Rio. Perkenalkan dulu, saya mewakili Cotton Council International. Mengucapkan banyak terima kasih atas kehadiran rekan-rekan para desainer dan merek-merek busana Muslim Indonesia di acara Cotton USA for Modest Fashion 2025. Acara ini kami selenggarakan bertujuan untuk memberikan informasi dan juga sedikit edukasi mengenai terutamanya bahan serat katun dan juga mengenai penggunaan bahan katun sebagai salah satu alternatif untuk digunakan di busana muslim yang sangat sesuai terutama untuk digunakan di negara kita yang beriklim tropis. Memang mungkin sampai sekarang penggunaan bahan katun di industri busana muslim kita mungkin masih kurang banyak dipergunakan ya. Tetapi melalui acara ini kami berharap bahwa kami dapat memberikan informasi dan juga sharing experience terutama dari salah satu desainer Indonesia yang telah menggunakan bahan katun USA di dalam koleksi busana modestnya, dan kami berharap sharing experience ini juga dapat menjadi inspirasi, memberikan inspirasi bagi rekan-rekan sekalian untuk berkreasi, memperkaya koleksi busana muslimnya dengan menggunakan bahan katun berkualitas, terutama dari Cotton USA. Dan untuk menutup kata saya pada siang hari ini, saya berharap agar rekan-rekan sekalian dapat mengikuti acara ini sampai selesai dan semoga acara ini dapat juga menjadi sarana untuk saling bersilaturahmi dan juga saling membangun relasi antar sesama pelaku industri busana muslim kita. Sekian, terima kasih.
Terima kasih kami ucapkan Bapak Rio Hartanto Jap. Luar biasa sekali, senang sekali saya melihat rekan-rekan yang hadir. Puasa-puasa masih tetap cenghar ya, luar biasa. Kami harap tetap engage juga di sesi-sesi mendatang because it's going to be such an insightful and informative session. And for our next session, we'll be discussing on the performance of US Cotton. Seperti Pak Rio bilang, kita akan melihat bagaimana kualitasnya, sustainability, durability. Nah, di sesi ini Anda akan mendengar lebih jauh lagi dari dua technical consultants of Cotton International, yaitu Profesor Muhammad Tausid and Mr. Lieven Verais. Dan setelah itu, kami juga menyediakan sesi Q&A di mana rekan-rekan semua bisa langsung bertanya lebih lanjut lagi. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome for the first presentation, Professor Muhammad Tausid.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back in Indonesia. So I am Muhammad Tausif, and I work as a technical consultant for Cotton Council International, in particular for the solutions team I'll talk about in a minute. And I work as a part-time consultant. I am a professor of sustainable textile manufacturing at the University of Leeds in United Kingdom, and I'm also deputy head of School of Design, but I'm not a designer. I'm a textile engineer by background, but I work very closely with brands, fashion designers, fashion management, all different colleagues. So what I'm going to talk about today is we look at fabrics, we look at products, but ultimately the building block of those materials is the fiber. So we want to understand fiber a bit better. So it is a bit technical, so please stay with me. But hopefully we'll go through that and see how those fiber properties impact the the design choices. So how do they impact the final fabric performance at the end? So as you can see, we have the technical team. You have Pavarsak, who's the head of the CCI solutions team, and then Levin is here today. He was going to present after me, and then we have experts in different parts of the world with different areas of expertise, which cover all the way from fiber up to the finished fabric. As a solutions, our 5 key offerings, we do on-site mill visits, we help mills and manufacturers how best to process US cotton. We run US Cotton Academy, which is for brands, which is for mills and manufacturers, in detail about the US cotton mill exchange program, seminars which we are doing here, and a mill performance index. So these seminars, these activities are important to educate and bring the latest and greatest about US cotton to the users and consumers and potential users of the US cotton. So I'm going to talk about cotton fiber itself. So I'm going to go a bit more zoomed out, look at the global textile industry, our materials demand, where cotton stands in it, and then in particular about US cotton, what are the advantages, sustainability profile of US cotton, and then we talk about fiber quality and fiber selection. You know, terms like fiber, might, strength, yarn count, what do all these terms mean and how do they link to product choices? And ultimately how things are converted into a yarn, and then Levin will take you from yarn on to the finished fabric in his presentation. So it's a very busy slide, but just to give you an overview, so we have 124 million tons. So we use 124 million tons of fibers each year, and this has been increasing like anything. And if you see there, the cotton is about 20%. So we use 25 million ton of cotton. So 20% of all the fibers which we use are cotton. But cotton has a much bigger proportion in fashion and textile applications, especially for consumer applications, for certain reasons, because cotton is a preferred fiber by the consumers. And if you look in particular in further detail, then cotton itself, there is like 70% cotton, conventional cotton, and 28% of cotton is aligned with certain sustainability programs. And for the US cotton, the US CTP, that is our program, and I'll mention a bit more about it later, but that gives you overall mix of the global fibers. So the biggest fiber, so it's the second largest fiber. The largest fiber is polyester. So we use nearly 70 million tons of polyester. When you talk about sustainability, I always ask, when I'm teaching students, I always ask them, so out of 70 million ton polyester, about 13% is recycled, which is about 7-8 million ton. Any guesses how much of that comes from textile waste? How much of recycled polyester comes from textile waste? 0.13%. 0.13. 99% of recycled polyester, more than 99, comes from PET bottles. So when bottles can be converted back into bottles, why are we making polyester fiber out of it? It's not a truly a recycle. So I think devil is always in the detail. So when you scratch the surface, you look at the data, then you know that how much is out there. And that's where one of the strengths of the US cotton is. We have a lot of data. With a lot of data on quality of the fibers, with a lot of data on the sustainability of the fiber, and I think data is important. And as we go more into further years, it will become more and more important that you can prove what you are saying, and data is the key to make those claims. And you can see 1% recycled cotton. So recycled cotton is a very, very small percentage as well, but that's a separate discussion. But this gives you an overall global overview of how we use fiber. So cotton and polyester together represent 80% of all the fibers which we have. And why cotton fiber? I'm not going to read through all of this, but I will put a link if you want to know more and read more about it. But cotton is a natural fiber. It is soft, it is absorbent, it is breathable, and the structure of the cotton fiber, the way I'll show you some pictures later on, the structure of it promotes breathability. It promotes comfort for the human. So it is a fiber which lasts longer, which is environmentally biodegradable, it is absorbent, breathable, and then the list goes on. If we move to the next slide, it reduces risk of infection, the comfort, especially weather. So moisture management is a very important property. So if you are in a hotter climate, or even not in a hotter climate, our body, the skin and the textile, there's a microclimate in between them. So that microclimate, the moisture management is a very, very important property. So cotton, that's why it feels more comfortable to wear cotton. So a lot of hotter countries when you go, generally cotton is a preferred choice of fiber for those reasons. And it is biodegradable, I already said, it is recyclable in general. So global cotton production, you can see China is the biggest producers, India, Brazil, United States. Though United States is the 4th largest producer, it is the 2nd largest exporter. Most of the US cotton which is produced, it is exported worldwide. But that is an important chart to see, because whenever we talk about sustainability, all discussions always go towards environment. They always go towards water, chemicals, and those things. Whereas there are 3 pillars of sustainability. Environment is one pillar, social side is the 2nd pillar. Millions of farmers, smallholder farmers, millions of people who are linked to that cotton value chain. And then the economic sustainability as well. So all 3 things are very, very important when we think about sustainability. It is always not just linked to the environment part of it. And we look at the US cotton. So this is the US cotton belt. So 17 states in the US, they grow US cotton, and then this gives you the breakdown of that. Again, it's a massive area. It's even bigger than a lot of the cotton growing countries where they have the cotton regions. And you can see how big the US cotton area is across 17 states, and there are 14,283 farms. And as you will see on the next slide, so all these farms, all these are, I think more than 95% of them are family owned. So there are people from 3 generations, 4 generations, multiple generations growing cotton. So there's a lot of heritage associated with the cotton production as well. And you can see here some of the examples here. You have one from South Carolina here, Arizona, from New Mexico, and you can see the stories that it is amazing how multiple generations, some people are 4th generation, 3rd generation, how the cotton is being grown. So I'm going to show you a small video on the next slide. So you'll hear directly from a US cotton farmers. It's good to hear how do they do it, what does it mean to them, and then we'll continue the presentation after that.
Farming is much more than a job. There's a spiritual connection to the land. My name is Nathan Reed. I'm a cotton farmer. My grandfather saved his money and purchased this land in the late 60s. And my father grew up on the farm and he loved it. And I'm kind of the same way. I farm other crops, but cotton is just different. It's part of our heritage. U.S. cotton is trusted because it's grown in the most sustainable way possible with a focus on environmental issues. A lot of times with farming, you have these employees that work for 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and that wouldn't happen if you didn't treat people right. And every cotton farmer I know loves what they do, so we take pride in what we do. It's very technologically advanced occupation. Precision agriculture technologies, the use of GPS technologies that I use on my farm have allowed me to conserve resources. All my fertilizer inputs are done variable rate based on soil sampling, so each spot in the field gets the exact amount of fertilizer it needs. I'm using about 20% less fertilizer, and then we do GPS landforming. So we're able to landform land so the water is more efficient, it doesn't erode. I've gotten into heavy use, extensive use of cover crops to help protect the soils, to prevent erosion, The cereal rye that we grow, it actually has an allelopathic effect on weeds, so it produces a toxin. It makes its own herbicide essentially. Between the shade on the ground and the root structure of the cover crop, our water irrigation efficiency is just dramatically increased, and we're using a lot less water. Our father forward. I would put our sustainability and environmental friendliness and the highest quality cotton against anywhere else in the world. I wouldn't bring them out here if I didn't feel that we were in a safe environment. It's something out here in Cornwall. The land, it's our livelihood, and it runs deeper. It's a generational thing. Now I'm trying to do my job and do my part and leave the land in better shape for the next generation. My dad, he was my hero in life. I feel every day whenever I go out and kind of look across the fields, I feel him standing right there next to me.
It's quite self-explanatory, but you can see how not only it means a lot and the heritage, but also the innovations. And I'm going to mention some of them as we go through that, how US cotton farmers keep on innovating and they embed technology into their production, which makes it more sustainable at the same time as well. So very, very quickly, how cotton goes from field onto the bale. The first part is the preparation of the field, prepare the field, then is the plantation of the seeds, and they go through a cycle, and as they grow, and then the harvesting part comes in. So you have the cotton balls, they are mechanically harvested. The cotton itself, when the harvesting is done, you form these modules. You can see these round, big modules, massive modules. So these modules then go to a ginning factory. So that's where the ginning comes in. Within a ginning, you are separating the cotton fiber from the seed. And then the fiber is baled, and the seed itself, and on my second and third slide I had some data, so even that cotton seed is used for animal fodder, it has other applications. So all the parts of the plants are used for different purposes. So you have done the ginning, and the end of ginning is a cotton bale. So this is a US cotton bale, and that is what is exported and then milled and manufactured, converted into yarns, fabrics, and finally all of this is there. But we always have to remember that the whole supply chain works due to consumers. So if you remember more recently, we have seen globally the consumer buying power has reduced, for example, last years. So that means people buying less clothes, brands placing less orders, the whole supply chain slows down. So that's the consumers are the key in that whole chain when you are producing. No matter how many bales you have and how many yarns, fabrics you have, ultimately consumers make a decision. And a smaller proportion, but a growing proportion, is environmentally aware consumers. As consumers become more and more aware, they want to know what is in their product and what choices you have made to put materials into their product. So that becomes more and more important. But with US cotton, you have all that data, all those innovations as a part of the cotton growth. And then there is this idea of continuous improvement. So US cotton, they employ technology, as Nathan was mentioning in his video. So they employ technology and they keep on innovating to improve the quality, improve the yield of the cotton itself. And as an example, you can see here from 1995 on to 2023, the yield. So yield is that how much cotton, weight of cotton you're getting from the same area. So you can see from 500s, you've gone up to 900. So from the same area, if you're getting 500 pounds per acre, now you're getting 900 pounds per acre. So that means that if you don't do anything else, but only increase the yield, you will decrease the water use because you are using the same water to get more cotton out. That means that you are more sustainable just by that simple metric. But that's not the only metric. A lot of other things have changed over time as well. For example, introduction of new varieties. So a lot of work goes into seed technology, seed research. And you can see here, as an example, when a certain variety was introduced, how the fibers, the number of bales which were longer became higher. So there were more and more fiber available which was longer, again by innovation in the seed technology itself. And in terms of sustainability goals, so US committed a lot. So over the last 35 years, there have been dramatic improvements in land use, energy use, gas emissions, and you can see some of these 10-year goals for the US cotton. We want to increase the soil carbon by 30%, decrease soil loss, decrease greenhouse emissions, energy use, water use. All those are the targets for the future that will continuously improve the sustainability profile of the fiber. And this lists some of the practices. So some of these practices, so 100% we have a tracking system, all cotton is traceable through the supply chain. 26% reduction in insecticides from last 20 years. And then the other thing, a lot of cotton, a lot of press goes towards water use of the cotton. There's a lot of data out there, this many thousand liters of water and this many glasses of water, lifetime worth. But technically, if you look closely, not all cottons are the same. For example, just see an example here, 64% of US cotton is not irrigated. So it is rainfall which is used to grow the cotton. So irrigation, as you can see, 5% is fully irrigated and 31% is supplemented. So again, all over the world, cotton unfortunately gets a lot of press, and a lot of these numbers and data are from 1990s. And world has moved a lot, efficiencies have gone a lot, so a lot of there are unfortunately some wrong myths about the use of resources from the cotton as well. And then precision agriculture. So precision agriculture is that, to be honest, I was surprised when you talk to some of the US farmers that they have these satellite-based systems, and then they scan the whole area, so to per square meter, or they have sensors, and then they control the amount of inputs required to grow cotton. So you have such a high level of precision agriculture that you use resources in a very, very systematic way. And then as I mentioned, USCTP, US Cotton Trust Protocol, is a sustainability program launched in 2020 by the US Cotton. So how you ensure the sustainability of the US cotton. Not only that, you can also ensure the traceability of the US cotton. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just to show you some data that how compared to the 2015 baseline using USCTP, how things have improved in land use, energy use, water use, soil conservation. You can see that USCTP, Cotton Trust Protocol cotton, is achieving, and there are continuous improvements. This will improve as we go ahead further. Now coming to the fiber itself, so cotton fiber, as you can see, so this is how the fiber is, bale is, but this is how a cotton fiber looks like. So cotton fiber, as I said, it is naturally those convolutions, that structure of the fiber itself, that is what makes cotton very, very special. So even when we are trying to produce, viscose and polyesters and synthetic fibers, we're still trying to crimp them, we texture them, trying to mimic as much as possible like cotton, because cotton gives those premium properties as part of the process there. And then there are cotton fiber. I always ask, so how fine this fiber is? I think I have the next slide to talk a bit more. So it's important to know the importance of the fiber and the scale of the fiber. So if I zoom into my shirt, you see a fabric. The fabric, you have interlacements here, you have yarns here. So roughly you have in 1 millimeter you have 3 yarns here. If I was using finer yarns, I will have more number of yarns here. I was using coarser yarn, I would have less number of the yarns here. And then if I go further down, I can see that this particular fabric was polyester and cotton blend. So you can see how cotton. So this cotton fiber is about 15 micron in size. 50 micron, to put things into perspective, human hair, a touchy subject, I'm losing a lot, but that's a separate conversation, is 5 times thinner than a human hair. So cotton fiber is 5 times thinner on average than a human hair. So it's a very, very fine fiber, but that fiber and its properties define the final properties of the product. So it's important to know the data to understand how the fiber works, and that links to the final product. So we're going to talk a bit more about the quality of the fiber itself. So we had covered until bale, so you know how ginning done and the bale was ready. At that stage, in US, there is a sample taken from every single bale and it is tested for quality. Every single, so that's why I mentioned 100% of US cotton is classed. So you test every cotton bale and you measure the properties of those fibers. And the most important properties of any fiber are length, strength, and fineness. How long a fiber is, how strong a fiber is, and how fine a fiber is. And for cotton, there are some other properties which are very, very important as well. But whenever you're making fiber choices for any product, these three are very, very important parameters. So for the quality, again, it's a very busy slide, but there's an instrument which measures, so each bale is tested. And for cotton, beyond the length, strength, and fineness, we also measure the color of the cotton, because it's a natural fiber. It varies a lot, so you have to measure the color of the fiber, the moisture content of the fiber. Then we talk about the length. The length uniformity becomes very, very important as well. So not only how long it is, but how much variation it is in the length of the fiber, because it's a natural fiber. If you make viscose or polyester, you cut them all to equal sizes, whereas natural fibers have the variations within the length. So these properties, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to talk about length, strength, fineness, color very, very briefly. So if we talk about fiber length, so fiber length, as a general principle, we always, depending on the application, but generally normally a longer a fiber it is, it results in stronger materials. And it also results in better quality, because if you have a lot of short fibers, they tend to come onto the surface and they make pills, other things, but generally you prefer longer fibers, but it's not always the case. It will depend on the application. But if you want to make very fine yarns, normally you will need longer fibers. If you're making very, very thick yarn, like for denim, that how the length impacts the final product. And then, just in general, there's upland cotton, which are upland cottons, and then there's extra long staple cotton, ELS cotton, which are longer fibers, like Pima, Supima, Giza, these materials, but those are very small proportion of the overall cotton supply chain. So if you look at the overall global mix, 97% of the fiber is upland cotton, and a very, very small proportion, 3% of them are extra long staple, but extra long staple cottons are much more expensive than the upland cotton as well. So measuring the length, I'm not going to go to technical detail how it is measured, but important parameters is the upper knee length. So what is the average of the top 50% of the fibers in cotton? And the second thing is uniformity index. So if you have a lot of short fibers and long fibers, there's a wide range of distribution. So you have low uniformity index. So how uniform the length distribution is, that is very important as well. So length and length uniformity, both are very, very important property for the cotton fiber. And then I'm going to show you some data from last 20 years. So this is again, because US measures all this data, no other cotton origin has this level of data available. You can see from 2000 to 2024, actually 24 years, how the length, so this is 1.05 inches, you can convert it into millimeter if you want to, but you can see how the cotton fiber length has continuously improved over the last 25 years. Again, those innovations in seed technology, better farming practices, mainly the length is linked to the seed technology and the genetics of the fiber itself. Then uniformity index and short fiber content. You can see again how from last 24 years the blue line is the uniformity. So you want better uniformity and low short fiber in your cotton fiber. And you can see how over the years there is a concentrated effort to improve the uniformity index and decrease the short fiber content. Again, there is detail there. The next important property is the fineness. So for cotton we call it micronair, or more commonly mic. You know, is this 4 mic, 4.5 mic? If you work with synthetics, we call it Decitex. You know, Decitex. This is a 1.6 Decitex fiber. This is 2 Decitex fiber. But for cotton, it's a complicated fiber because it's a natural material. And if you look at the cross section of a fiber, I'll come back to this slide here. If you look at the cotton cross section, it has a lumen, a hollow part in the middle of the fiber. So again, that makes cotton more complex as well, but gives is better maturity, dyeing properties as well. You can see here mature fibers, immature fibers, dead fibers, but generally cotton has maturity and fineness both integrated into one property. So whereas for synthetic you have solid fibers, there is no hollow part in the middle. Again, this gives better structural features, better properties, but you need to understand the fiber better as well. The important thing is this level of maturity will define the color, the dye absorbance of cotton. Because if you have very thin of these walls, it will not absorb a lot of dye. If you have a thicker, mature cottons, they will absorb color in a better way and they'll give a better shades. And I think last level, this is fineness. Again, just for reference if you're interested, but generally how fine a fiber is, that is defined. Synthetics normally tex, dtex, whereas for cotton it's mostly mic, MIC, mic or micronair used to represent fineness of a cotton fiber. And you can see an image here. So 3.8 micronair cotton, 5.1 micronair cotton. So you can see both dyed in the same way. 5.1 more mature, can absorb more dye. 3.8 less, and you can see the color difference there as well between the two different cottons there. So length, as you said, longer there. Micronair, smaller the micronair means the in general fiber is finer. Higher the micronair means cotton is coarser, the fiber is thicker. That is in general a principle for the micronair. Again, you will choose mic based on the application. So if you want to make very fine yarns, you can't use very thick fibers. You have to use very fine fibers then. Whereas if you want to make very coarse yarn, like for denim, you can use thicker fibers. Whereas if you're making a very fine shirting fabric, then you have to use very low mic cottons. But the low mic cottons can be more tricky to process. So micronair has an impact on the choice of the materials as well. Again, this looks a bit funny graph, but it should be funny because micronair is a parameter which is affected by the environmental parameters. So it is not genetics of the fiber, but how the environment is, the rainfall, hurricanes, any other environmental impacts. For example, you can see 2017 there was a massive decrease because of a severe weather situation. So mic is more weather impacted property, and you can see the data from last 24 years there. And then the strength. So you can see the strength of the fiber is very important as well, because strength directly contributes to the durability and the final strength of the yarn and the strength of the final garment or the product there as well. Again, you can see from last 24 years, from 27 gram per tex, we have gone up to 30.5. So there's an increase in improving the length and the strength of the cotton fiber. And finally, the color. So the color is, so two main parameters to define the color of the cotton. RD, which is the degree of the light reflectance, and the plus B, which is the yellowness or the pigmentation, level of pigmentation in a cotton. So these two parameters are used to define the color of a cotton. Again, color is important because it's a natural fiber, so depending on the conditions, color will vary as well. And to show you that of the US cotton, you can see from last 24 years, you can see mostly almost 90% of the materials are white grade. So generally very good quality with the US cotton. So if you look at here, so this slide is going to talk about how some of these parameters which I've mentioned, fiber quality. If you look here, on the top are the fiber quality parameters, and on the left is the yarn quality parameters. Fiber to yarn, how do they link? I'll show some examples. For example, micronear has a key impact on the evenness of the fiber. Maturity, dyeability is very much impacted, but maturity doesn't impact, for example, the appearance of a cotton. Appearance is more impacted by the trash content in a cotton. So US cottons, mechanically harvested, low contamination, very high level of cleanliness, the trash levels can be controlled. Then the strength, you can see, doesn't impact evenness, dyeability, hairiness, anything, but impact the strength of the yarn. So all these different parameters impact the properties of the yarn in different ways. So again, 70% of the quality is impacted by the fiber quality. So if you do not choose the right fiber, you can't get the right property out of the yarn. And this slide now talks about cotton quality parameters on the top, and then the fabric properties. How do the fabric properties are impacted by those things? For example, I'll give example of the fabric handle here. Fabric hand. So hand is how the feel or the drape of a fabric. So if I make, for example, if I make two fabrics, they are the exact same weight, exact same yarn count, but in one fabric I use a finer cotton, and in the other one I use a coarser cotton. The fabric which is made from the finer cotton will drape better, which have a nicer drape, will be more stronger. Because in single yarn there are more fibers, there is more friction, they are stronger. Finer fibers are always softer. So if I'll give another example. If I am wearing a shirt or a fabric next to my skin with a very thick fiber, when that thick fiber is going to touch my skin, it's going to prick my skin. Because my skin has to put a lot of force to bend that fiber. So it's going to cause me a discomfort. Whereas if I'm wearing a fabric made of very, very fine fibers, that fine fiber is easily gonna bend. So this is an engineering principle that finer materials are more flexible. If the same material finer is always more flexible, longer is more flexible as well. So if you're gonna go for premium properties, go for longer and finer. But again, as I said, there's a cost associated to that, to make those premium and finer. But if you're making denim or you're making a certain home textile, you might not need that level of properties there. So that's where the properties impact the fabric, the final appearance, the fabric handle of the garment as well. And then, as we're talking about fiber selection, how do we choose fibers? The selection of the fibers becomes very, very important as well. As you can see an example here, that there could be insufficient fiber quality, oversized fiber quality. So if the fiber is not good enough, and you try to make, for example, a fiber which is good enough for denim, and you try to make a shirt out of it, it's going to be very challenging. Similarly, if you try to make a denim out of a fiber which is very, very good quality, you will make a good denim out of it, but you will spend a lot more money than you should have on that fiber. Whereas then we have appropriate fiber quality, which we call yarn engineering, that you have the right fiber for the right application. So application is very much linked to the final choice of the material. So we'll come back to this. At the end of the presentation, there is an end. At the end of a presentation, there will be, I'll show you some examples of products, and how we choose different fibers for those products. And I'm going to give you a very, very quick, normally we study this for 2 or 3 semesters, but how to convert fiber into a yarn. What is the quick steps, how you convert a fiber into a yarn. So first of all, before I go more into processing, there are different types of the yarn. So you have staple yarns. Staple yarns are which made out of staple fibers. So you have cotton short staple, you have woolen, worsted, acrylics, long staple, you have even extra long staple, you have linen, very, very small proportion there. But generally you have staple yarns, you have filament yarns. So filament yarns are mostly made where you will take polymer plastic pellets, melt them through like a shower head like of a machine, spin bread, and then you make filaments out of that. So there's are the filaments, and then there are also a composite yarn, sometimes where you mix staple fibers and filaments together into a single yarn, like stretchable yarns. You put lycra, elastane in the middle, you wrap around with cotton, so those are the composite yarn. But you see here on the left, there are a lot of process steps. Opening, cleaning, carding, drying, all these steps to make a yarn. The reason for that is you need progressively a lot of steps, because you think about that cotton bale which you had seen, a single cotton bale has about 50 billion fibers. You have to trust me on it. It's an estimation, so 50 billion fibers. So normally when you are in a spinning mill, you would take at least 60 to 80 of those bales to make a yarn. So 50 times 60, 3 trillion fibers. You're starting with 3 trillion cotton fibers, and you end up with a yarn which is on average 100 fibers in its cross section. 100 fibers as you go along the length. So you have to do a series of steps, step by step, to convert that cotton bales into a yarn, and then there are different variants. So we'll talk about that. You have combed yarns, you have carded yarns, and then you have other systems there as well. So combing is simply you comb out. You comb out short fibers, so when you want to make finer yarns, finer garments, you have to remove shorter fibers to get better quality fibers out, and then you make finer yarns with using combed yarn. And carded yarns are more commonly used for application coarser side, where like denim, shirts, home textiles on the short to the medium range side of things. And so I'll go back to, so important concept on the next slide is the yarn count or the yarn numbering. So yarn numbering is very important, because how you define, because that is how you tell what yarn count I'm going to use for different types of fabrics. So yarn count in very simple terms is length per unit mass. So how much length is in a certain weight, in a certain mass. You see the video here, we're taking the cotton yarn and it is wrapped for a certain number of cycles, and you measure the mass of that piece. When you have length and the mass, you calculate the count of a yarn. So count or a yarn number is important. So higher the number, finer the yarn. So for cotton counts is called English cotton count. The bigger a number, finer a yarn it is. Whereas for synthetics, if you are using denier, normally the bigger the number, coarser a yarn, and smaller the number, finer a yarn. So for example, if you are trying to change from a filament yarn to a synthetic yarn, you need to understand these units. So if you replace denier with the same, it will not work in the same way. So they are a slightly different system. So generally, English cotton count, higher the number, finer the yarn. For example, again I've given an example here that 10 single yarn, 10 and a single yarn might be used for denim, 80 single very fine used for business shirts, so that yarn number becomes very, very important. And you can see that person is measuring the mass of it. And in simple terms, if I have very thick yarn, same length, it will weigh more. If very, very fine yarn, it will weigh less. And this shows you, so now if you know what the yarn count is, so smaller the number, coarser it is, bigger the number, finer it is. This talks about some of the applications. So you can see very coarse yarns, carpets, denim, terry towels, furnishing fabrics, home textile, medium to fine, again home textiles, nightwear, workwear in that region, very fine yarn, shirt, blouses, sewing thread, super fine yarns, though we are mentioning up to NE80, though very small proportion where people spin up to 200 single, 300 single, but that's a very, very small proportion. Most of the textile industry lies within those regions of the yarn count. But again, there are applications which use very, very fine yarns as well. Then spinning systems. So ring spun yarns are very common. So ring spinning system and its variants are the most common yarns in stepping yarns. So 70% of the yarns are roughly ring spun yarns. So ring spinning is a 200-year-old system, and it is pretty much fundamentally stayed the same, except it will become more faster and more productive. And then there are alternative spinning systems like open-end spinning, rotor spinning system. Rotor spun yarns are more faster to make, but you can't make very fine yarns with rotor spinning. Then you have air jet spinning, again a method which makes yarn and makes it very, very fast, but the yarns itself you can't make finer yarns. So if I go to the next slide, I'll come back here. So this shows you a comparison of different spinning systems. So this shows you the speed. So ring spinning about 25-30 meters per minute of the yarn. So in general, rotor spinning is 6 times faster, and vortex spinning, the new models, can be 15 times faster. But the challenge is that the ring spinning can do a very broad range of the yarn counts. That's why ring spinning is the most common method of making yarns in the textile industry. So not only that, ring spinning also is the most premium quality of the yarn as well. The way the yarn is made, if you have the same cotton fiber, but one is ring, one is rotor, you make the same yarn count and you make the same fabric, the rotor fabric will feel much more harsher than the ring spun yarn structure, because that is the structure of the yarn itself. If you have the same yarn fiber, same yarn count, air jet spun yarn, it will have much less hairiness. So air jet yarn, people prefer it for example, for digital printing. It's a very low hairiness. It works quite well. But what I'm saying is the choice of the spinning method affects the quality of the material as well. In general, just going back, that ring spinning is the most common method and gives the most premium quality of the fabrics from the processing. And within ring spinning, then you might hear terms compact spinning, and corded, combed, all these are different variants of the spinning system itself. And coming back to the fiber parameters. So we've talked about the ring, rotor, air jet. Again, different spinning systems will have different requirements. So for ring spinning, length is very, very important. For rotor spinning, for example, fineness and strength are more important than the length. That's why shorter cottons you can easily use in rotor spinning, but you cannot use them easily in the ring spinning. So if you have recycled cotton, it works very well with rotor spinning. But for ring spinning, there are challenges. The reason, because for rotor spinning, length is not that important. For ring spinning, length is much more important. So again, the choice of raw material links to the type of the yarn which is there as well. And if you look at the process overview, how the yarns are made, so we'll start with the bales. So those bales which were manufactured by the US farmers, they come, so I will show you a small video as well after this, but you have the bales in a blow room. You have the carding machines, drying frames, combing machines, then another draw frame. So all these series of process steps to make a yarn. So in summary, if all of these machines are there, you are producing a combed yarn. If you take these two out, you are making a carded yarn. So a carded yarn is all this process except these two machines. Combed yarns is all of these machines, and combing is where you are removing quite up to 15 to 25% of cotton fiber out. And cotton fiber is 50 to 70% of the cost of a yarn. But what you remove is sold as well, or is used into other application areas within the industry there. And then one more term we see is the compact yarn. So compact, on the ring spinning system, you have a suction, a negative suction, and that improves the quality of the yarn. So it's good to just know that there are compact yarns, ring yarn, combed yarns, carded yarns. All these terms mean slightly different process variations within the yarn spinning industry. So if I show you a video now, so we'll start from a bale. You can see cotton bales. So this is a blow room, fiber being opened, goes to a carding machine, you get a sliver out, go to the draw frame. This is a combing machine. just to show you how the inside of a spinning mill looks like. And finally you have the spinning machine here, the ring spinning machine, and finally wound out into a final yarn, and then the testing lab is where you will end as well. So this is how a spinning mill. So a lot of spinning mills are very, very modern as well. So high volumes, high production is achieved through the process. And again, this is the testing lab. Again, the measurement, it is a science as well as an art, the textile manufacturing itself. And then this is the different types of waste which is produced during the process. Again, the spinning industry is very good. They are very good at reusing almost all of this waste. But I've seen a lot of studies where people say this as recycled fiber, but none of this is as per standards is recycled except this. If you have a fiber already converted into a yarn form and then you recycle it, then it is a recycled fiber. Anything before that, these are all called process waste. These are all waste from the process, but spinning industry in general is very, very good at reusing all of these waste either within their own process after cleaning it, or might be if you're producing a lot of cotton oil. So these are all very, very good quality clean fibers. If a ring spinning mill produces these, they can send it to rotor spinning and they can make very good quality yarns for the denim. So there's a lot of sustainability practices already embedded in the manufacturing processes. And for the US cotton, if you are starting with 100 kg of a fiber, these are the optimum, or generally, not optimum, but generally very, very commonly mills achieve this level of the yield, that they achieve 74%. So if they start with 100 kg of a fiber, they get 74 kg of a yarn, combed yarn. For carded, they get 91 kg of a carded yarn. Again, this is quite high compared to some of the other sources from the other origins there, because cotton is the way it is harvested, the way it is graded, and the mills have the data of all the cotton, so they can use that data to process cotton in a better way. So last few slides, I'm going to show you some example products. So, and that was the whole purpose, to come to this point to discuss that. So yarn count, fiber parameters, and how it links to some of the products. The first product I show you here is, for example, denim. If we have denim for modest fashion, so you can use rotor spinning. So rotor spinning is cheaper, it's faster comparatively. You use a coarser yarn count, 10, 8, 12 single. This is an example, there is a range generally. It is for weaving application. This is the mic of cotton which you will use, 4 to 4.2. The staple length, 27 millimeter to 28 millimeter long, and 29 gram per text strength. So you can, so if you remember these terms for a denim application, but let's go a bit more finer. Let's go to US cotton yarn if you want for the hijab fabric. So what I did was, I did some research and I saw, for example, there's 100% viscose fabric used for the hijab fabric, for example. But viscose, this is a crepe fabric. So crepe is over twisted. If you twist a yarn too much, it gives a crepe effect. So this is an over twisted viscose fabric. And if you want to make that out of cotton, so you have 30 single. I would use compact spinning to give a better structure of the yarn. Microneedle 4.3 to 4.6. And if you see here, the last slide was rotor. So the length was 27 millimeter. But now I'm going a bit finer and I'm using ring spinning, so I have to use longer fibers. And then I have to use slightly stronger fibers as well. So as I'm going finer, I'm using a different application, I have to use different parameters of the fiber itself. Let's go a bit more finer if we have Arabic taupe fabric. So this example which I saw was 150 denier. This was a filament yarn. So if it is a polyester filament yarn, unless you have very specialized polyesters, polyester doesn't absorb moisture. So cotton absorbs 7 to 8% moisture on its weight. Polyester absorbs 0.3%. So if you get sweaty, you're gonna feel very, very, very clammy. whereas cotton can absorb into its core the moisture. So that's where the comfort comes from. So, and then I've converted Daniel into English cotton count. Or you're not happy with the durability of a fabric, you have to go and ask for a stronger fiber. So all those choices for the designers are linked back to the choices right at the start of the raw material. I'll pass it on to Leuven. Thank you much everyone, and I think we'll have some time for question and answer after that.
Thank you very much, Professor Muhammad Qasim. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage also a technical consultant from Cotton Council International. Please put your hands together for Mr. Leuven Verrijst.
Good afternoon to everyone. Just like my colleague Tassif, I'm also a technical consultant being part of the solutions team. And as Tassif and as all of you here in the audience, I'm passionate about textiles. And I have to be careful not to jump out of the stage, because I see here these wonderful African print fabrics, these wonderful garments from designers, these wonderful digital prints, and I just want to touch them, as passionate as I am. So also during the break, if you want to come over here and touch and see the fabrics and the garments, please feel free to do so. So my presentation will be about the processing of US cotton, so meaning the dyeing and the finishing part. I will give you a brief introduction of it. I will guide you a little bit through the dyeing and the finishing process of cotton and of US cotton. I will touch also on the durability of US cotton, and then talk a little bit about different finishes and different ways how to dye and to make US cotton fabrics very fashionable. So first of all, as my colleague Tassif already mentioned, cotton is known as a strong, a breathable, a natural and a renewable fiber. And it's one of the most widely used fibers in the textile industry. If we go then into dyeing and to finishing, with the latest technologies available, nowadays dyeing of cotton is already a very sustainable process. And there will be a lot of things in the future that will happen to make it even more sustainable than it is now. Then also if you look at cotton, and as Tassif also mentioned, the superior comfort of cotton and its natural softness, combined with the possibility of making a variety of different functional finishes of it, makes it an extremely versatile textile product that can be used in a lot of fashionable fabrics and garments. So I'll present you some things that come out of some studies, because CCI, or the solutions team, in partnership with external companies, might be spinning mills, might be dyeing mills, might be external consultant companies. We have conducted several studies in which we try to show that US cotton is superior when compared to other cotton origins. And when I talk about superiority in terms of dyeing and finishing, I'm talking about superior dye take-up compared with other cotton origins. I'm talking about unmatched quality due to the low contamination of the US cotton. US cotton, as Tassif mentioned, is machine-picked, and especially compared with hand-picked cottons, it has much less contamination, and this has a real impact on the final fabric appearance and on the defects that can happen also in a fabric when it is then knitted, woven, and finally dyed and finished. US cotton has also a higher durability, and it has also an excellent color retention after repeated washing. So first of all, going a little bit into the dyeing and the finishing. If we look at what type of dyes that are nowadays available to dye cotton, there are different groups of dyestuffs available. I will not go into details of all the dyestuffs that are available, but mainly nowadays what we use are reactive dyes. Reactive dyes in dyeing will be more or less 85 to 90% of all the dyestuffs used to dye cotton. I'll just explain you very shortly the principle of reactive dyeing. When we start dyeing, we put the dye stuff into a dyeing bath. This is a machine where we put water in. We put the fabric or the yarn or whatever we want to dye in there. And then we have to take the dye stuff out of the bath, out of the water, and put it onto our fabric. How do we do that? We do that in 2 steps. First of all, we put a lot of salt in there. The salt, what will the salt do? It will shift the dye stuff from the water towards the fabric, and this dye stuff will make some very light bonds with the fabric. This is not dyeing yet, because if we stop here and we wash the fabric, all the dye will come out again. And what we do, we go to the Mayer, called alkali, and we make a very strong bond that makes that the dye stuff reacts chemically with the fiber and stays there forever. So this is basically the principle of dyeing, of reactive dye. We make this very reactive, strong bond with the fiber, and this dye stuff will not come out when it is washed. However, a lot of this dye stuff is not bonding with the fiber. Until recently, about 60% of all dye stuff was bonding with the fiber, and 40% could not make the bond. So this 40% was going to the effluent. Nowadays, with the latest technologies in chemicals, we have dyes that can react up to 85–90%. This means instead of having 40% going to your effluent, nowadays only 10 to 50% goes to your effluent. And these dye stuffs also have the capacity, they are much more durable after repeated washing. They stay on your fabric, which means that you can have a fabric that you buy in a deep red color or a deep navy color, and after the repeated washing, 10 home launderings, 20 home launderings, 25 home launderings, it still looks nice. So also, if we look in what happened over the past decades, if you look in what happened about 40, 50, 60 years ago, to dye 1 kilo of cotton, we needed about something like 200, 300 liters of water to dye that. Then we passed to newer machinery about 30 years ago. Until today, there are still some of these machines in the textile industry. We reached from above 200 liters, we could reach to something like 100, 120 liters per kilo. With the newest technology available, and a lot of dyeing mills, they are already working with these kind of machines and with these kind of chemicals, we are able to reduce this to 18 and 30 liters per kg of fabric to be dyed. And there is new technology coming up, and probably within 10 years from now, we might even reduce this amount of water up to something like 6 to 10 liters per kg. So if we look at that nowadays, dyeing cotton is a much more sustainable process than it was decades ago. So I'll just explain you a little bit some of the advantages that US cotton has. In December 2024, we performed a study in Pakistan where we compared different cotton origins on dyeability. What we did, we chose cottons with exactly the same parameters, because if we do any study within our team, we have to make a fair comparison. We have to compare apples with apples. So we chose bales from different cotton origins with the same micronair, same fiber maturity, the same color, and the same fiber length and fiber strength. And then we dyed them, and we looked at how deep this fabric looked, and we actually measured that on a colorimetric instrument to see what is the difference in dye take-up between those fabrics. We were working with cotton from Ivory Coast, meaning West African cotton, Brazilian cotton, and US cotton. We dyed this all in the same machine to have exactly the same parameters during the dyeing process. US cotton was given as a reference 100% dye take-up. If we compare that with Brazilian cotton, Brazilian was about 3% lower in terms of shade, on the navy shade, and West African cotton was about 4% lower in terms of shade. We did also a different shade. We also dyed it in green, what I call a bottle green. A bottle green is normally based on a very difficult dye to work with, which is a turquoise dye. And this is a dye that has a very big influence on the dye take-up. If you look at this shade, US cotton, again, as a reference, 100%. The Brazilian and the Ivory Coast cotton came out at 10% lower intensity. This means if you would like to obtain exactly the same shade on West African or on Brazilian cotton, you would need 10% more of dye stuff to dye that. So it makes also US cotton is more sustainable from a dye take-up point of view compared with other cottons. There are some samples here of this green fabric. I will just ask someone to pass them around so that you can see actually the difference in dye take-up between US cotton, Brazilian and West African cotton. I have it as a picture also, so you see above there is the sample of the US cotton, and then you see the West African cotton and the Brazilian cotton, where you can see there is a difference. Of course, on a picture it's not always very clear, but you might be able to see it better on the physical samples. And one advantage also of US cotton is its whiteness. US cotton as a fiber is normally whiter compared with some other cotton origins, and one of the very big advantages of US cotton is that it is less contaminated. That it is less contaminated and that the fiber itself contains less iron. And that comes from the soil where it is grown. And this has a very big impact on the whiteness degree when you use it as a white fabric. When you want to use a white shirt, a taupe, or when you want to use a fabric to print it on. So the whiter your base is for printing, the better will be your final color and your final impact of the printing after printing. So you see here also, this was measured on a colorimetric system where we measure it and we give a whiteness degree on it, so the higher the whiteness degree, the whiter the cotton is. If we compare US cotton both for carded and combed yarns, US cotton gives a better whiteness degree compared with the other cotton origins. I can show it also, here you see, difficult to see on the picture, but you see that the top level is US cotton, and then when you compare it with the one that is under the Brazilian, in the Ivory Coast, you see that this is slightly yellow, more yellow. On the fabric, this will be very visible, and you will really see that the Brazilian or the West African cotton does not come out as white compared with the US cotton. And one important thing also, and this is directly related to the contamination level of US cotton. And when I talk about contamination, we are talking mainly about plastic contamination. Plastic contamination that comes from the field. There might have been plastic in the field when it was grown, and then this gets into the bales, and it cannot be completely eliminated during the spinning process. Or it might be also from the wrapping of the bales, because the bales, when they are shipped, they are wrapped in the plastic, and sometimes this plastic tears apart, and it can get into your yarn. This is mainly a problem for cottons that are hand-picked. And this gives you then an issue when you look at your final fabric defects before cutting, before producing your garments. So if you look at and you compare here, cotton from West Africa, Brazil, Pakistan, US, and you see the number of defects that you have per 100 square yards, US cotton clearly comes out as the cotton or the fabric with the least defects compared with the other cottons. Cottons such as Ivory Coast, hand-picked, Pakistani cotton, also hand-picked, they come out with much more defects. This means that if you have 100 yards or 100 meters of fabric, after cutting, there will be a lot of panels that just go to the waste because they cannot be used, because there is contamination in it, there is a defect in it, and this is also directly related to the sustainability and with the final quality of the fabric. And just going into something else, that is durability. As I myself, I come from Europe, and with the new legislation that is coming now very quickly into Europe, Europe is working on a legislation that will oblige brands to introduce, first of all, recycled fibers into their product portfolio, and that will oblige also manufacturers to produce garments and textile products which are much more durable. So actually, European Union, they want to finish with fast fashion. They will not be able to finish because there are a lot of brands in Europe that will not allow it. But there is legislation behind it that they want people to buy garments or other textile products, and they want them to last longer. So one of the things we did a study where we tried to show the durability of US cotton, how durable it is after repeated washing compared with other cottons. So what we did, we took fabrics produced with exactly the same fiber parameters of Pakistani cotton, West African cotton, Brazilian cotton, and US cotton. We submitted that to 5 home launderings with a subsequent tumble drying, 10 washings, followed by tumble drying, 25 washings, followed by tumble drying, up to 50 washings, followed by tumble drying. Normally 50 home launderings is normally more or less the lifetime of a fabric or of a garment. If you look at the strength of the fabric, called bursting strength, this is a test that is done in a laboratory, and you can see what happens in terms of loss of fabric strength after repeated washing followed by home laundering. You look at the US cotton, which is the blue line. After 50 washings, it has a superior durability, a superior strength compared with the other cottons. Then we looked also, first of all, for carded and for combs. For combs, it's more or less the same. Also, US cotton comes out better compared with the other cotton origins. Then we looked also at the color strength, because one of the things, I talk about myself, when I buy a t-shirt or whatever fabric that I would buy, if after several washings it does not look really blue anymore, it looks already like washed, I might put it away. And I always say, I have a lot of t-shirts that are pajamas. All my t-shirts that do not look very nice, I use them to sleep. But I have too much, I do not sleep too much, so I would need to sleep more to be able to use all my t-shirts. So probably if I would use only t-shirts made out of US cotton, I might not have this problem. As you see also here, when we made this study on carded yarns and on combed yarns, and we look at the color retention or how deep it is dyed, US cotton, even after repeated washing, it still looks like new. You might wonder why, for instance, this goes up. This goes up mainly because the fabric, when it comes out of a finished fabric, it is in a certain state. After the first washing, it will shrink. And if you measure then the color as it is more tight, it might look a little bit darker after the first home laundering than it was in initial. But what is actually important is to see how long it stays dark after repeated washing. And then just to finish the part of the durability, we also looked at the appearance of the fabric. We washed them 50 times in a washing machine with tumble drying after it, and then we looked at the appearance in terms of pilling behavior to see how much these little balls are on there. And US cotton also maintains itself more or less similar up to 50 washings, whereas the other cottons were slightly worse compared with US cotton. So the durability of US cotton, when we compare it with Brazilian or West African cotton, is higher than the other cotton origins. And then just to finish on my last slide, to talk a little bit about what is possible in terms of finishing and in terms of dyeing to make fashionable fabrics. So first of all, and I'm very glad to be here in Indonesia. The last time I was here for the Cotton Day, I was fortunate to see how batik is made. There was a lady producing batik and showing how batik is made. And it has always been my passion, because myself as a textile engineer and working into the dyeing and the finishing, I wanted to see how batik is made. I was looking at this lady and seeing how it was done, and I really understood how this was done. And this is, for me, batik is one of the most extraordinary ways to make fabrics, and especially to work with cotton. An imitation of batik is what is called African print. I don't know if anyone knows what is African print. African print is an industrialized way to produce batik. And these 5 fabrics that are here on the front are African prints. African print is still very fashionable and very fashion in Africa. And actually, as a man, if you want to ask your future bride in marriage, you have to offer at least 2 or 3 fabrics of very good African print. So if anyone wants to ask somebody to wedding, you have here 5 fabrics, it might be successful. Then also in cotton finishing, we can do a lot to make the fabric in the finishing to make it more beautiful, with a better handle, more beautiful, and so on. So there is a fabric also that I have here that if I would not tell you, probably no one would think that this is cotton. I don't know where the sample is. I will just ask also to pass it around. This is a fabric produced out of 100% cotton. It's not a very fine count. We looked at it and it should be probably something like a 60s count, but it has been treated into the finishing department to make it look and to make it feel like silk. So there are possibilities within the finishing department to make fabrics really look very, very fashionable, and to make cotton being a superior fabric compared with other ones. Then, as I mentioned already, fabrics are durable after repeated washing. Cotton is a very durable fabric. I can use it for many times. Just think about a denim. If I have a jeans, I can wear my jeans for several years before I have to throw it away. We can produce vibrant colors in dyeing and in printing. Look at these African prints. Look also at the digital printing that we see here, which are really very vibrant colors, and where we can make really very fashionable fabrics out of it. We can also introduce some functional finishes. We can make it antimicrobial, we can make it hydrophobic, we can make it flame retardant, we can make it UV protected, we can make it wrinkle-free. About 3 years ago, I bought 3 shirts in Thailand that are made out of 100% cotton. I'm not sure if it is US cotton, I just know it is cotton. And they sold me the fabric as being wrinkle-free or non-iron. And I did not really believe it. I said, no iron is not possible in US cotton. When I have this shirt and I wear it the whole day, and I put my arm like this, there is not any wrinkle in here. If I put it in the washing machine and I put it in the tumble dryer and take it out, I don't have to iron it. So this is also one of the finishes that can be done to make cotton as good in terms of wrinkle-free or no iron compared with other fabrics. And then we can do a variety of mechanical finishes to give a different appearance to the fabrics, like brushing, shearing, sanforizing, and so on. These might be some terms that you heard of. These are mechanical finishes where we can give some hairiness to the fabric, we can make it softer, we can give it different handles, and we can make it more fashionable. So just in a nutshell, cotton is my preferable fabric. I'm very cotton. This is cotton. My socks are cotton. My underwear is cotton. This is wool, but it's also natural fabric. So cotton, especially US cotton, is one of the preferable fabrics for me, and I hope for you it will also be. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause, Leland? And of course, Professor Kaufman, we would like to invite you to say thank you for turning us into cotton experts. That was so enlightening. And of course, we will have time for our audience. Mungkin Bapak Ibu, jika ingin bertanya, boleh langsung mengangkat tangan. Kita ada kesempatan untuk 1 penanya. Langsung saja, mungkin kalau mau langsung bertanya dalam bahasa Inggris atau bahasa Indonesia, bebas saja, senyaman mungkin. So, creating a good garment or material, it takes a whole lot of process, from the factory itself and even the soil needs to be a certain way to produce a specific or a very exclusive or high quality garment. So that is amazing. Sekali lagi, jika ada Bapak Ibu boleh mengangkat tangan. I think what's going to happen is later when you go down, they're going to just mob you with questions. Is that okay?
I always tell my students that if you don't ask a question, then I'm going to ask you a question. So you understand. So I'm going to ask a question during the break then.
Alright, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan yang meriah for Professor Kelvin and also Mr. Dylan Perez. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Dan sekali lagi Bapak Ibu, tentunya masih ada sesi-sesi yang sangat menarik dengan informasi yang kita tidak ingin sampai ketinggalan. Oleh karena itu tetap bersama kami hingga nanti akhir acara, karena setelah ini kita juga akan kehadiran 2 pembicara atau 3 pembicara yang sangat menarik sekali. Salah satunya adalah yang saya pakai ini ya. Mungkin sudah sangat mengenal Mas Didit Maulana. Dan sebentar lagi kita akan break sejenak sebelum masuk ke sesi berikutnya. Dan sementara kita menikmati mungkin snack atau bagi Bapak Ibu yang juga ingin menunaikan ibadah sholat, boleh langsung saja untuk mau dirasa-rasa, dipegang-pegang sendiri untuk dari produk USKN yang hadir hari ini. Mungkin kalau baju saya boleh bagian tangannya dipegang-pegang ya. Silakan, ini juga tentunya persembahan yang terbaik dari IKAT oleh Mas Didit Maulana. Oleh karena itu Bapak Ibu, kita akan break sejenak 30 menit. Kami persilakan dan kita akan kembali untuk sesi berikutnya tepat 30 menit dari sekarang di Ballroom. Terima kasih, boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan sekali lagi untuk pembicara-pembicara kita. See you in 30 minutes everyone.
Gak apa-apa ya, aku minum.
Nah, mungkin di sesi sebelumnya we've touched on sourcing. Kita sudah melihat processes dari Cotton USA. Nah, kali ini kita juga akan melihat atau mendengar lebih jauh lagi mengenai digital print. Mungkin sudah sempat mendengar tadi ya, ada sedikit-sedikit tersentuh mengenai digital print. Kali ini kita akan membahas lebih dalam mengenai digital print on the US cotton fabric. Dan pada kesempatan ini saya memiliki kehormatan untuk mengundang as Head of Sales and Marketing at PT Argo Manunggal Triasta. Boleh kita berikan sambutan yang hangat Bapak Zahid Nazir.
Selamat siang menjelang sore. Hari ini saya pakai batik, jadi bahasa Indonesia aja ya, supaya lebih santai, kita bisa lebih nyaman bicaranya. Saya hari ini ingin bicaranya lebih general aja, karena mungkin sebagian besar teman-teman mungkin udah ada pengalaman mengenai digital print. Tapi hari ini kita coba refresh kembali, kira-kira digital print itu apa? Dan menurut kami digital print itu sangat bermanfaat dan berguna buat modest fashion week. Maka hari ini kita coba bicara digital print dengan katun. Lebih spesifik, kita akan bicara di US cotton. Dan kira-kira digital print itu apa? Kegunaannya bagaimana dan benefitnya bagaimana? Kira-kira kurang lebih itu highlightnya. Ini hari nggak ada technical, kita bicaranya lebih global saja. Pertama-tama mungkin perkenalkan, saya mewakili Argo Manunggal Triasta. Kami itu perusahaan yang didirikan sebetulnya dari tahun 1949. Tapi kita mulai di tekstil kurang lebih di tahun 60-an. Jadi boleh dibilang kami adalah pionir dari tekstil di Indonesia. Mungkin beberapa perusahaan-perusahaan kami udah dikenal seperti Argo Pantes, Daya Manunggal dan sebagainya. Pada dasarnya kami itu produsen kain-kain pencelupan khususnya katun atau mixing antara katun dan polyester atau katun dan rayon dan kain-kain sustainable lainnya. Sekitar 8 tahun yang lalu kita bikin unit baru yaitu digital print. Jadi dari tahun 8 tahun yang lalu kita juga boleh dibilang salah satu pionir. Itu waktu pertama kali kita langsung terjun ke digital print. Jadi di digital print ini kita bikin semuanya yang natural fiber. Natural fiber itu artinya bisa katun, bisa rayon, bisa linen, ataupun sutra. Dan boleh dibilang quality kita karena dengan teknologi yang kita ada cukup memadai, udah banyak kita ekspor juga dan banyak dipakai oleh brand-brand lokal ternama. Jadi saat ini saya mungkin mulai sedikit jelaskan sebetulnya kelebihan digital print itu apa dan kenapa ini berguna buat Modest Fashion Week, buat Modest Fashion. Kita mulai pertama kita lihat mengenai shorten production lead time. Ini mungkin sangat berguna bagi teman-teman semuanya. Jadi di digital print itu file-file atau desain-desain yang Bapak Ibu ingin print itu cukup kita membuat itu sebagai digital ready, baik itu dengan JPEG, dengan TIFF atau lainnya, dan itu sudah ready untuk di print. Jadi nggak perlu kita mesti bikin screen print satu persatu, dan sekali kita udah bikin filenya dan itu sudah ready dan kapan aja bisa digunakan. Jadi dari fleksibilitas itu lebih mudah kalau kita mau jalani digital print. Kedua, pastinya teman-teman juga tahu secara quantity digital print itu fleksibel. Jadi artinya kita bisa print quantity yang kecil. Ada yang mau 300 meter, ada yang mau 500 meter, ya silakan aja. Artinya kita cukup fleksibel karena cara kerja digital print itu secara simpelnya seperti kalau kita punya printer di rumah, tinggal kita mau print 1, 2, 3 dan sebagainya. Kira-kira sesimpel begitu. Yang kedua, segmen besar yang kita lihat di digital print itu adalah jumlah warna yang bisa kita dapat. Jadi kalau konvensional print biasanya pasti ada keterbatasan warna. Ada yang 12 warna, ada yang 15 warna. Kalau dari digital print sebetulnya jumlah warnanya itu luar biasa banyaknya. Jadi dari boleh dibilang 8 dasar warna itu kalau dikombinasikan menghasilkan kurang lebih sekitar 900 kombinasi warna. Jadi fleksibilitas warnanya itu unlimited. Kita bisa main dengan warna-warna yang baru. Ditambah lagi digital print ini eco-friendly. Karena benar-benar kalau memang kita mau produce 500 meter, maka tinta-tinta yang akan kita gunakan, chemical-chemical yang akan kita gunakan cukup untuk 500 meter. Bukan kayak konvensional print di mana kalau memang kita mau jalan 500 meter ya mereka mungkin ada minimum mesti 1500 atau 1200, maka obat-obatnya dipakai sesuai dengan itu. Dan terakhir, digital print ini repeatability-nya itu bagus sekali. Jadi kalau hari ini kita print, nanti 3 bulan, 6 bulan kemudian Bapak Ibu ingin mau repeat lagi, selama kita menggunakan kain yang sama, obat atau chemical yang sama, pasti hasilnya akan sama. Dan itu satu kelebihan yang menurut saya sangat bagus. Jadi satu waktu kalau sales kalian bagus dan kalian mau repeat, nggak usah repot-repot lagi, filenya udah ada, tinggal confirm, tinggal langsung jalan. Nah, dengan kelebihan-kelebihan ini kita pikir digital print ini sangat membantu UKM atau new startup bisa benar-benar bereksperimen dengan desain-desain baru. Di sini saya coba sekilas kasih gambaran mengenai step-step digital print. Ini boleh dibilang hampir di semua factory kurang lebih sama. Jadi awalnya yang kita datang, awalnya kita lihat pertama mengenai kainnya sendiri. Kain itu datang kita harus inspect dulu. Kenapa ini penting? Karena kalau nanti ada defect-defect, itu akan mempengaruhi di proses-proses berikutnya. Jadi dari awal kita cek dulu kepastian bahwa kainnya udah benar-benar bagus. Kedua, stepnya adalah kita namakan coating. Coating itu secara simpel adalah pemberian chemical di permukaan kain supaya nanti waktu kita ngeprint tintanya itu akan nempel, bahkan penetrasi ke dalam kain supaya hasilnya maksimal. Tentu sebelum print kita juga cek filenya, pastikan desainnya semua sudah benar, mereka punya repeatability-nya sudah benar, dan itu semua kita biasanya atau bahkan perusahaan-perusahaan tekstil pasti mereka udah ada tim yang bisa ngebantu buat rekan-rekan semuanya. Nah setelah itu mulai masuk ke jantung prosesnya, yaitu digital print. Digital print ini banyak sekali ya mesin-mesin yang ada di market. Yang menentukan adalah tipe print head yang dipakai. Kalau tipe print headnya tipe yang bagus dengan pixel yang lebih tinggi, hasilnya pasti akan jauh lebih tajam. Kalau memang pixelnya kurang tinggi, hasilnya akan sedikit lebih kurang. Jadi digital print sendiri juga banyak tipe-tipe mesin. Nah setelah itu, setelah sudah kainnya semua di print, baru kita lewatin satu proses, yaitu proses steaming. Steaming ini penting karena di steaming ini terjadilah yang kita sebut fiksasi. Fiksasi itu buat apa? Tujuannya agar kainnya tuh nggak luntur. Jangan sampai nanti setelah udah kita print semuanya, ternyata kainnya luntur. Nah disinilah fiksasi. Jadi fiksasi ini proses penting sekali. Setelah fiksasi, pastinya semua kain digital print yang menggunakan natural fibers itu harus lewat proses washing dan drying. Nah nanti di slide berikutnya saya akan jelaskan washing dan drying ini sisa-sisa chemical atau defect-defect kain itu kalaupun ada itu akan terjadi perbaikan di proses ini. Nanti kita lihat dengan US Cotton kenapa lebih bagus. Jadi setelah washing baru kita lanjut ke finishing. Finishing itu simple, kita cuma mau end feel-nya itu seperti apa. Apakah ada yang mau lebih soft atau nggak perlu terlalu soft, itu dikerjakan di finishing. Jadi setelah itu lanjut finally ke inspecting dan rolling. Kurang lebih ini adalah step-step untuk digital print. Kelihatannya sih simple-simple aja, straightforward. But in reality, of course, it's not always sesimpel begitu. Pertanyaannya sekarang, kenapa katun lebih baik dibandingin yang lain? Coba kita lihat beberapa tipe-tipe kain yang ada di pasaran, yang banyak digunakan di Indonesia, khususnya untuk modest fashion. Kita semua tahu rayon, banyak digunakan di pasar khususnya untuk bikin jilbab atau blouse and so on. Rayon itu betul, memang mereka itu soft, mereka itu hand feel-nya bagus, dan mereka juga breathable, artinya tidak terlalu panas. Tapi rayon itu ada juga kekurangannya. Kekurangannya simple, kalau dalam kondisi basah, rayon itu kekuatannya buruk, artinya lebih gampang rusak kain rayonnya. Kedua, rayon itu juga susutnya lebih besar. Nah, ini few small tips yang kira-kira di rayon. Sementara kalau katun itu memang dia juga soft, dia breathable, artinya dia nggak panas. Kita semua udah tahu. Tadi juga di slide di presentasi sebelumnya kita udah dengar bahwa dia itu hypoallergenic. Jadi artinya cocoklah buat kulit-kulit. Secara umumnya bahkan nggak pernah ada cases di mana kita ada allergic gitu terhadap katun, practically almost nothing. Dan kondisi katun sendiri untuk kondisi dalam keadaan basah juga tetap kuat. Jadi dengan ini kita merasa katun ini cocok sekali buat modest fashion. Kita juga lihat polyester. Polyester betul sangat kuat. Polyester juga bisa lebih gampang kering, tapi dia lebih panas. Nggak sebagus breathability-nya seperti yang lain. Secara eco-friendly, biodegradable, rayon itu juga bagus. Artinya rayon itu membaur. Tentu kalau kita lepas di tanah satu waktu dia akan terurai. Tapi rayon itu butuh waktu yang cukup lama. Yang paling bagus adalah katun. Katun itu karena natural fiber, benar-benar dia biodegradable, dia buat environment-nya itu friendly banget. Justru yang paling bahaya adalah polyester, karena polyester ini yang dari synthetic fiber ini yang banyak membuat polusi-polusi. Nah ini small tips saja untuk kita sebetulnya mengetahui sebetulnya karakter-karakter kain itu apa. Di Indonesia yang banyak kita lihat printing itu ada beberapa tipe, ada yang pigment printing, ada yang reactive printing. Yang kita gunakan itu semua reactive printing, dan juga ada disperse print. Disperse print ini banyak digunakan untuk kain-kain polyester. Banyak mungkin teman-teman udah tahu sistem print sublimasi. Nah, di sini saya mau coba sedikit menjelaskan dari segi warnanya saja. Kalau kita masuk ke pigment print, memang secara warna dia bagus, dia banyak bisa vibrant warnanya, bisa lebih banyak keluar. Tapi pigment print itu kalau nanti terkena cuaca, udara, apalagi kita di Indonesia panas, hujan, lama kelamaan warnanya itu akan mulai pudar. Yang paling cocok kembali lagi reactive print. Reactive print ini dia benar-benar lebih tahan lama terhadap perubahan-perubahan cuaca atau iklim-iklim yang ada. Nah kalau disperse lebih ke polyester, dan disperse itu limited hanya ke polyester. Sementara tadi kita kalau di reactive dyes itu bisa di berbagai kain, bisa di katun, bisa di rayon, bisa di sutra, bisa di linen dan sebagainya. Sementara disperse print itu benar-benar lebih ke polyester aja. Jadi fleksibilitasnya lebih berkurang. Jadi menurut kami memang reactive dyes ini yang lebih terbaik karena opsi-opsinya lebih banyak, lebih fleksibel. Nah, di sini saya mau sedikit bahas kenapa cotton USA lebih bagus. Nah, kalau Bapak Ibu lihat di meja masing-masing ada sedikit potongan-potongan kain yang kita coba taruh di meja-meja. Ini sedikit ilustrasi aja kita kasih lihat. Jadi dari sini kita coba print dua jenis kain katun yang exactly sama, berat sama, konstruksi sama. Yang satu adalah dengan cotton USA, yang satu dengan katun biasa. Nah, di situ bisa dilihat. Pertama dari segi warna, di print dengan proses semuanya yang sama. Benar-benar yang katun USA warnanya lebih keluar, lebih alive, lebih vibrant. Padahal kita pakai proses dan speed dan semuanya yang sama. Kedua, ini adalah step yang paling penting. Kedua, kain cotton USA itu sebetulnya lebih sedikit defect-defectnya. Yang saya maksud defect itu apa? Artinya kain pada dasarnya, apalagi natural kain, itu pasti ada yang namanya defect-defect. Defect mau itu slap, mau itu nap, artinya sisa-sisaan benang yang masih nempel, yang terurai nanti terjadi kain. Itu waktu kita print, dia akan terprint seperti biasa. Tapi waktu kita washing, si nap dan slap itu mulai copot. Nah, akan terjadi nanti seperti ada bintik-bintik putih di kain. Nah, itu udah nggak bisa diperbaiki kalau udah di digital print. Makanya kita selalu lebih priority pakai kain yang kualitinya bagus. Artinya kita benar-benar rekomend pakai US cotton karena defect-defect seperti itu benar-benar berkurang, sangat-sangat berkurang, dan itu mempengaruhi hasil print dari Bapak Ibu semuanya. Nah, memang tadi udah dijelaskan kapas yang benar-benar dari US itu memang banyak sekali benefitnya secara quality, dia punya environment, sustainability-nya, maupun dia punya labor practice-nya itu benar-benar udah paling bagus lah menurut kita. Jadi quality yang saya maksud, hasil yang saya maksud itu adalah itu, warnanya jauh lebih bagus, lebih bright, lebih vibrant, dan defect-defect di kain US cotton itu benar-benar sedikit, artinya hasil jadinya akan jauh lebih bagus pula. Nah, ini sedikit aja saya kasih sedikit gambar. Ini adalah terakhir tahun lalu kita adain semacam fashion show bersama Ibu Gea. Ini adalah hasil jadi kita yang kita menggunakan 100% US cotton. Nah, in reality lebih bagus ya, mungkin ini agak sedikit blur di gambarannya, tapi warnanya itu benar-benar alive. Ini digital print, ini pakai reactive print, ethnic print, dan benar-benar di sini terlihat gitu. Kalau sekilas orang lihat, it's like more benar-benar kayak natural pembuatannya, kayak alami punya, bukan digital print. Padahal ini dari digital print. Jadi ini 100% pakai US cotton, makanya nggak bakal ada defect. Bayangkan kalau ada bintik-bintik putih karena ada defect-defect, hasilnya akan benar-benar tidak baik. Nah, sama juga kita ada juga kolaborasi awal tahun ini dengan Mas Didit dari IKAT. Nanti Mas Didit akan banyak bicara soal ini. Ini juga contoh-contoh lagi. Kira-kira tipe-tipe hasil print dengan US cotton, dan kita bisa lihat warna-warnanya, corak-coraknya benar-benar lebih integrate, lebih benar-benar kelihatan detail-detailnya. Nah, kira-kira dengan ini semua maka kami merasa memang digital print ini cocok karena fleksibilitasnya sangat banyak buat startups ataupun UKM di modest fashion. Dan saya berharap informasi sesingkat ini kira-kira refresh buat kita dan semoga berguna. Kalau nanti ada pertanyaan-pertanyaan pada waktu networking, dengan senang hati kami bantu. Demikian dari saya, terima kasih. Selamat sore Pak.
Selamat sore, terima kasih Bapak Zahid Nazir. Tentunya untuk presentasi membawa kita mengenal lebih dalam lagi about digital printing on US cotton fabric, and I agree with you, sir. I think it is amazing. The very first time I actually saw the item of clothing here, I didn't realize that it was digital printing until you actually get closer, and then but the material is so high end that the color is just amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu, tentunya seperti kata Bapak Zahid Nazir, nanti jika ada yang ingin bertanya boleh langsung ke Pak Zahid Nazir pada saat networking. Namun pada kesempatan kali ini kami juga sudah kehadiran dari Deputy Education and Research National Board Indonesia Fashion Chamber. Anda tentu sudah mengenal dengan sangat baik sekali. Beliau juga merupakan fashion designer and a writer as well, contributor, right? And also, so ladies and gentlemen, tanpa berlama lagi untuk membawakan Stride Trend Forecasting 25-26 for modest fashion. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan yang meriah, Yufi Kartaatmadja.
Selamat sore semuanya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Terima kasih sudah hadir pada acara hari ini dan masih tetap setia hingga tahap selanjutnya. Tadi udah ngobrolin tentang masalah teknis terkait tekstil. Kemudian juga Pak Zaid sudah ngebahas tentang alternatif pengolahan tekstil khususnya di desain itu dengan digital printing. Kita tahu bahwa digital printing ini di modest fashion khususnya dan muslim fashion lagi hype banget ya. Mungkin teman-teman fashion designer yang hadir di sini, brand owner juga sudah sangat sering sekali menggunakan material dengan teknik finishing khususnya di desain dengan digital printing. Nah, untuk sesi saya kali ini kita akan membahas tentang trend forecasting dan mungkin nanti aku coba relate menyambungin dengan digital printing dan juga cotton and specifically in cotton USA. So, izinkan saya perkenalkan diri terlebih dahulu. Walaupun tadi sudah diperkenalkan, saya Yufi Kartaatmadja, saya National Board untuk Research and Education Division dari Indonesia Fashion Chamber. Dan saya juga ingin memperkenalkan Indonesian Fashion Chamber adalah sebuah asosiasi profesi yang hampir sebagian besar, mungkin bukan hampir ya, karena memang salah satu persyaratannya bahwa member di asosiasi kami ini adalah harus memiliki brand atau sebagai fashion designer. Tapi di dalam asosiasi kami juga tidak hanya membahas seputar bisnis gitu ya, kami juga berbagi ilmu, berbagi apapun yang bisa kita share kepada sesama member maupun kepada publik terkait tentang industri fashion khususnya, tidak terkecuali tekstil juga. Nah, di sini khususnya di dalam Indonesia Fashion Chamber kami punya sebuah wadah lagi yang kami sebut sebagai Fashion Trend Forecasting, di mana di sini kami mencoba untuk meriset tren yang specifically untuk market Indonesia, walaupun tidak menutup kemungkinan ini juga referensinya bisa berlaku untuk global market. Jadi untuk tren yang nanti akan saya jelaskan dan share informasinya kepada rekan-rekan semua di sini tidak hanya spesifik untuk modest fashion, tapi juga suitable with any kind of fashion genre, untuk contemporary fashion mungkin, karena memang lebih ke global. Cuma nanti kita coba discuss untuk di Q&A kira-kira untuk modest fashion seperti apa. Oke. Sebelumnya masuk ke tren, saya juga pengen mungkin memberikan informasi, sharing juga kepada teman-teman semua bahwa ada dua bahasa atau ada dua istilah term yang aku nggak tahu apakah rekan-rekan semua di sini sudah memahami, sudah mengetahui, atau jika memang belum, saya ingin memberitahu bahwa terdapat dua. Jadi untuk modest fashion and muslim fashion atau islamic fashion itu adalah dua term yang berbeda. Jadi as a designer, as a brand owner, kita harus paham dulu nih, kategori produk kita itu adalah modest fashion atau muslim fashion atau nama lainnya adalah islamic fashion. Untuk modest fashion, drive atau diambil dari definisi yang sendiri, itu sebenarnya adalah cukup sederhananya definisinya itu adalah baju yang sopan. Jadi baju tertutup, kemudian tidak sederhana, tidak terlalu menarik perhatian, termasuk berarti dari siluetnya itu sendiri gitu ya. Karena kalau misalnya secara desain, secara warna dia minimalis, sederhana, tetapi secara siluet dan detail terlalu berteriak, itu juga sebenarnya tidak masuk ke dalam definisi sebenarnya dari si modest fashion itu sendiri. Dan kalau kita lihat mungkin modest fashion ini lebih cocok untuk market lebih ke global karena tidak semuanya juga menggunakan busana yang masuk dalam kategori muslim atau islamic fashion. Intinya adalah pakaian-pakaian yang masuk ke dalam kategori polite atau sopan, tertutup, tidak terlalu berteriak dan tidak terlalu menarik perhatian. Jadi konteks tidak menarik perhatian itu juga sebenarnya punya batasan yang beda-beda dari masing-masing desainer as a creative person. Nanti kita bahas yang kita sambung dengan atau kita kaitkan dengan tren. Untuk muslim atau islamic fashion tentunya di sini adalah busana yang memang mengikuti secara mutlak dari aturan busana muslim itu sendiri seperti apa atau islamic fashion itu sendiri seperti apa, yang mana aturan tersebut tentunya berdasar pada syariat Islam, dari menutup aurat, kemudian penggunaan warna, penggunaan motif, penggunaan siluet, bahkan sampai penggunaan bahan. Jadi kalau misalnya memang ingin lebih detail juga teman-teman mengetahui terkait tentang muslim fashion khususnya atau islamic fashion, itu mungkin nanti kita bisa berbicara lebih dalam lagi di sesi networking nanti. Next, Indonesia, as you all already know that kita itu kaya banget. Latar belakang budaya kita beragam sekali. Kemudian kaitannya dengan agama, karena sejarah kita ini kita dijajah oleh berbagai bangsa dan agama juga masuk ke Indonesia itu juga beragam, sehingga hal tersebut mempengaruhi latar belakang budaya kita. Kita bukan negara muslim, Indonesia bukan negara muslim, tapi majority masyarakat Indonesia adalah beragama Islam. Itu pula kenapa yang membuat Indonesia memiliki diversity and also in the context of design in modest and fashion muslim itu bervariasi banget. Jadi kalau kita bandingkan ya gayanya orang Indonesia nih khususnya di busana muslim atau modest fashion, tentunya pasti teman-teman sendiri atau rekan-rekan semua sendiri sudah memahami gitu, apalagi yang memang berkecimpung di industri modest fashion dan muslim fashion pasti udah punya karakternya sendiri, dan itu penting sekali teman-teman memiliki karakteristik. Gaya saya seperti apa, DNA brand saya seperti apa. Nah, untuk bisa meramu DNA yang sesuai dengan karakter pasar, dengan tren, tanpa meninggalkan identitas kita, tentunya kita juga harus banyak sekali mengetahui wawasan informasi terkait apapun itu yang berhubungan dengan industri fashion, termasuk tentang teknologi tekstil yang tadi, yang sangat teknikal, tapi kalau menurut saya pribadi itu banyak sekali informasi yang baru buat saya, khususnya di cotton dan pengolahannya. Jadi khususnya kalau di Indonesia memang ada risetnya, karena kebetulan saya juga tidak hanya sekedar sebagai pelaku praktisi, tapi juga akademisi. Saya mengajar juga, sehingga segala sesuatunya memang harus ada real datanya. Kenapa hal ini bisa kita jadikan referensi gitu ya. Sebagaimana juga ketika kita meramu tren ini, itu juga semuanya based on riset and data. Nah, di riset ini itu berdasarkan dari Middle Class Consumer Studies di dalam sebuah buku yang ditulis oleh Bapak Yuswo Hadi, Marketing to the Middle Class Muslim. Jadi pembagian kelompok ini yang di slide berikutnya berdasarkan riset dari pasar middle market di Indonesia khususnya. Oke, ini juga mungkin informasi yang baru. Kalau teman-teman atau rekan-rekan semua mungkin sudah tahu, bisa aku lebih detailkan lagi informasinya. Jadi di Indonesia khususnya, karena riset ini berdasarkan market di Indonesia. Terdiri dari 4 klasifikasi. Ini juga yang perlu diketahui oleh teman-teman desainer. terbagi atas syariah atau muslim. Di sini tadi yang fashion muslim atau Islam, muslim fashion atau Islamic fashion, dan di sini yang modest. Kita bagi lagi berdasarkan modern and conventional. Ini kami ramu. Jadi kalau dari penelitiannya Pak Yusuf Hadi itu hanya sebatas market modern, konvensional, ada market muslim dan ada market modest. Tapi kita coba di tim riset kami untuk kita kolaborasikan dengan style. Untuk syariah kita terbagi dua menjadi syari konvensional dan syari modern. Syari konvensional seperti yang Anda lihat semua di sini, dan ini juga sudah sangat umum sekali ya, common sekali. Banyak masyarakat kita yang bergaya seperti ini, di mana kelompok market ini adalah yang mengimplementasikan Muslim fashion atau Islamic fashion secara mutlak. Dari warna, motif, siluet, itu semuanya mengikuti syariatnya. Tidak ada satu prinsip pun yang dilewatkan, karena memang filosofinya adalah sesuai dengan syariat agama Islam. Namun kita bisa lihat ada kelompok pasar yang lebih trendy, di mana walaupun mereka tetap mengimplementasikan syariat Islam dalam berpakaian, tapi tidak meninggalkan tren. Jadi variasi warnanya, kemudian motif, kemudian detail itu juga lebih beragam. Sedangkan untuk modest di sini adalah yang lebih modern atau lebih, tadi yang saya katakan lebih cocok untuk global market. Jadi gaya ini, modest konvensional, adalah yang paling banyak diadopsi di Indonesia dan gaya sehari-hari. Kalau saya lihat di sini rekan-rekan semua juga hampir sebagian besar yang menggunakan modest fashion atau Muslim fashion itu mengaplikasikan gaya ini. Kita lihat baju-bajunya masih tetap sesuai dengan syariat agama Islam, tetapi implementasi atau keterikatan dengan trennya itu lebih besar. Jadi otomatis secara material, kemudian motif, desain, warna itu lebih bervariatif. Yang pasti di sini ada prinsip yang paling tetap atau yang tetap dipegang itu adalah tidak menutup badan, aurat, yang maksud saya. Kemudian tidak lepas badan, jadi siluetnya longgar. Karena kita juga masih banyak ya melihat, sangat disayangkan masih banyak juga yang mungkin memiliki interpretasi yang berbeda dan bahkan mungkin ke arah yang salah ketika menggunakan istilah modest fashion atau Islamic fashion. Dan untuk modest modern ini adalah yang paling sesuai lagi untuk global market, di mana di sini sebenarnya masih sopan, masih tertutup, namun tidak harus menutupi semua auratnya. Jadi kita masih bisa melihat banyak yang menggunakan hijab tapi tidak menutup semua rambutnya atau bagian kepalanya. Karena kalau menurut syariatnya kan aurat leher, rambut, telinga itu masih masuk ke dalam aurat, sehingga harus ditutup. Nah, jika ternyata variasi model atau gaya berpakaiannya kita masih bereksperimen dengan model hijab, aksesoris gitu ya, mungkin ada kaki juga masih terlihat sedikit, itu masuk ke dalam kategorinya di modest modern. Dan ini juga yang banyak sekali diadopsi di Indonesia. Walaupun untuk kategori yang syariat ini mulai berkembang seiring dengan mulai awareness terhadap agama juga ya, karena di modest fashion atau Islamic fashion tidak cuma hanya sekedar industri pakaian, tapi juga sudah menjadi sebuah gaya hidup. Oke, next. Berikutnya saya akan bercerita tentang trend forecasting yang sudah dirumuskan oleh rekan-rekan saya di fashion trend forecasting. Jadi sebelum kita ketika ingin merencanakan sebuah desain, tidak cuman hanya kita harus paham DNA brand kita, which is itu adalah karakteristik kita, sehingga kita bisa berbeda dengan brand-brand yang lain gitu ya. Kita bisa bersaing di Indonesia secara lokal maupun secara global. Jadi kita harus memiliki karakteristik kita sendiri itu seperti apa. Kemudian kita pahami dulu market kita, siapa yang mau pakai, kategori produk itu apa. Ketika kita memang akan terjun ke industri modest fashion atau muslim fashion, berarti salah satu informasi terkait style reference atau style classification tadi juga bisa menjadi tambahan referensi untuk proses kreatif rekan-rekan semua. Dan berikutnya adalah tidak kalah penting kita paham terkait tren. Walaupun tidak harus selalu secara plek-plekan atau tidak perlu semua elemen dari tren tersebut kita aplikasikan ke dalam koleksi kita, namun kita pahami terlebih dahulu dan kita sesuaikan dengan target market kita, lalu juga kita pertimbangkan DNA brand kita. Jadi referensi terkait tren ini sebenarnya tidak wajib. Jadi ini cuman hanya sebagai salah satu referensi informasi yang merangsang proses kreatif kita. Nah, di sini untuk fashion trend forecasting, kami di Indonesia Fashion Chamber merumuskan fashion trend untuk 2025-2026 yang berjudul Strive. Perlu diketahui juga oleh rekan-rekan semua bahwa ketika kita merumuskan tren, tadi sudah saya mention sedikit, tidak harus semuanya kita aplikasikan ke dalam produk kita. Kita harus paham dulu tren mana yang cocok dengan kita, dan